One Sabbath, Jesus and his disciples were walking through some wheat fields. His disciples were picking grains of wheat as they went along. Some Pharisees asked Jesus, "Why are your disciples picking grain on the Sabbath? They are not supposed to do that." Jesus answered, "Haven't you read what David did when he and his followers were hungry and in need? It was during the time of Abiathar, the high priest. David went into the house of God and ate the sacred loaves of bread that only the priests are allowed to eat. He also gave some to his followers." Jesus finished by saying, "People were not made for the good of the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for the good of the people. And so the Son of Man is Lord over the Sabbath."
Hello, good to see you all. I'm Denise, for those of you who might not have met me. Look forward to meeting you over tea or coffee out there afterwards. It's been a big week for the start of a big year, and a big week for me personally. For those of you who don't know, my husband Drew, the love of my life, had a severe heart attack last Sunday morning. And so he spent the week in hospital, got home late Friday, and he's got a bit of a recovery journey ahead of him. It's going to be a while before he's back on his mountain bike. While we're in the emergency department on Sunday, our dog, Turner, ate a whole barbecued chicken carcass and became quite ill and spent Monday on a drip and the rest of the week recovering. And there was no way I was going to tell Drew about that, because I know that he loves me and our kids more than the dog, but I feel like the dog comes a close second. So I have been just a bit ragged around the edges this week. I have felt the fear of losing someone that I dearly loved for the last 36 years. I've felt some guilt around how long it took me to realise what was going on and, calling the ambulance. I've worried about the dog. I've felt the stress of juggling different needs, including my own. You know how it goes. I'm not unique in facing challenges that life brings. These things happen. But, I've also felt hugely supported by many. My boys and their wives were wonderful. They waited with me at the hospital for news on how Drew was. They visited multiple times. We had an amazing vet who went out of his way to ensure that Turner was okay, and I didn't have to worry about him too much. Drew's mountain biking buddies came and visited. They visited Drew. They checked in on me to make sure I was okay. And neighbours offered to mow the lawn. Someone, I don't even know who, I don't know whether it was Ryan or Shane, organised for David Bush to cover for me last week speaking, because I was not going to show up on Sunday night. And David dropped everything to cover for me, came with a couple of hours' notice. The board made sure that I knew I could take as much time as I needed. Many of you texted and messaged me and offered help and let me know that you're praying for me. And I think there were some people who decided not to text because they were supportive as well. So thank you. Things are slowly getting back to normal. I got grumpy with Drew today over something really stupid. And I yelled at the dog when he wouldn't stop barking, which is embarrassing because I think the neighbours overheard. They were coming to take the dog for a walk, so that was awkward. Anyway, the events of this week have made me reflect on the best way to live life. Because I tend towards being independent, and this week has helped me learn about interdependence. People need people. We need to take care of ourselves, we need to develop resilience, and we need people in our lives who care about us, because we just can't do it alone. If you don't have people, then find people, because you need people, and people need you. If you don't have people, well, maybe start here at MCC, stay for a coffee and get to know some people. Anyway, enough about all of that. On to last week's sermon, which I had already prepared. So that was good. So this is the start of our first month of MCC's big year, a year when we're looking at the teachings of Jesus. Creating margins. Yes, that's what we're doing this month. So this year we're looking at the teaching of Jesus, and we're kind of experimenting, and we're practicing the teachings of Jesus in everyday life to see what difference it makes. And I'll just give a little trigger warning here. At 2 points in this sermon, I'm going to be talking like the boomer that I am. So I just want to give you a heads up on that. The first month's theme, this theme for February, is create margins. The people who came up with the big year, they thought it was a good place to start, that if we're going to spend a year practicing the teachings of Jesus, maybe we should first take a look at our lives and see if there's any time and space to do that. The word margins takes me back to my school days. Here's the first boomer reference. Because at the start of each year, you had to take a ruler and a red pen and draw margins down the left-hand side of every page in your school workbooks. Who did that? People don't still do that. Do they seriously? How have we not moved on from that? How does that work on an iPad? I don't know. So maybe I'm not as much of a boomer as I think I am. So this is so that you can fill up your page with writing and still have some extra room to correct a mistake or add something you've forgotten, right? Like that's the point of a margin. And so it seems to make sense to build margins or buffers into life. And if we're wise, we're already doing that. So if you're a long distance runner, you keep a little bit of energy in reserve for that final stretch, right? Or the person behind you will pass you because they've kept a little in reserve. If you're driving on a busy highway, you follow the 2-second rule, don't you? You keep at least 2 seconds between you and the next car because the laws of physics dictate that anything less than 2 seconds and you will run up the back of that car in front of you if that car has to do an emergency brake. And if the car behind you is tailgating you, you take their 2-second margin, you add it to yours, and now you keep 4 seconds between you and the next car so that you don't have to brake quite so suddenly, and the car behind you also has some margins too. Only a fool breaks the 2-second rule, 3 in wet weather. That was actually probably a boomer reference too for all you young people. If you're working out your budget, your prime task is to make sure that money going out does not exceed money coming in. And one way of doing that is to build up a buffer, a margin. You just squirrel away a consistent amount, even if it's a tiny amount, squirrel it away each pay so that when an unexpected bill or an unforeseen circumstance arrives, you can dig into your reserve buffer and not end up couch surfing or digging a debt hole. This is very difficult to do in this cost of living crisis, but perhaps it's even more important. If you're driving to an appointment, you plan to arrive 5 or 10 minutes early. This allows for traffic delays, getting lost, not being able to find a park. I wish that I was better at this, and I know there are some people here who also wish I was better at this. And again, I apologise profusely. Well, these are all very sensible, but what's this got to do with the teaching of Jesus? If you have a Christian background or you've read the Gospels, you might be wondering when it was Jesus stood up and said to the crowds who were following him, I tell you the truth, create margins in your life. Well, Jesus didn't say that. Not exactly anyway. But he did have this interesting take on something called the Sabbath. And what he said is really a key to our whole big year. So it's worth taking a close look. If you're familiar with the Gospels, you'll know that Jesus' arch rivals were the Pharisees, a group of religious leaders who came across as legalistic, finger-pointing, uptight people. And they get a bad rap in our stories about Jesus. How historically accurate their portrayal by the authors of the Gospel was, we're not real sure. It's debatable, probably exaggerated. Every story needs a good villain, and our Gospels, while historical, are stories. The thing is, the Pharisees really wanted to please God. And God had given instructions on how to live as the people of God. So, and this is a really good question, if it's your genuine desire to please God, and God has given you instructions to follow, is it legalistic to follow them? Or are you simply being faithful? In fact, the Pharisees were so serious about following God's instructions and being faithful people of God that they came up with a strategy for how they could do it well. It was officially called putting a hedge around the law. And it was a way of being absolutely sure that you didn't break one of God's important laws. So it works something like this. God says we should ritually wash our hands before eating. This isn't something to do with hygiene, it's like a ritually pure kind of practice. So, God says we need to wash our hands, then we need to wash our hands. But is it possible that one day in our haste, we might accidentally fail to wash the very bottom of the palm of our hands? Like we just are a little careless that day and we don't wash that little bit. And that would be terrible, wouldn't it? Because we would unintentionally disobey one of God's instructions. So, thought the Pharisees, here's a good idea. Let's make a rule that when we wash our hands, we wash right up to our elbows. That way, we can't possibly miss any part of our hands. Do you see the logic to that? It makes sense, doesn't it? So the Pharisees decided to put in a margin. Let's put in a margin, a buffer, to make sure that we get it right. Every time we wash, we'll wash up to our elbows. Then we can be sure our whole hands are washed. A similar debate was going on in the first century about the Sabbath. God told us to work 6 days and rest from work on the 7th, the Sabbath. But what does work mean? We need to define it really closely because we don't want to break God's instructions unintentionally. Well, obviously you can't plough your field. I mean, that's obviously work, isn't it? So we can't do that. Can you pick a head of grain and eat it? Chew on it? Well, I mean, technically that's harvesting, isn't it? And harvesting is definitely work. So to be on the safe side, we'd better not do that. Let's not do that. That way we can be sure that we're obeying God's laws. And so these debates about how to obey God's instructions as well as possible were going on all the time about all sorts of subjects in the first century. Jesus comes along and he just blows that thinking out of the water. He says, dude, you got it around the wrong way. The Sabbath is made for people and not people for the Sabbath. God didn't design the Sabbath as some test of your loyalty to see how well you could obey God's instructions. Observing the Sabbath isn't for God's benefit, it's for your benefit. People aren't meant to serve the law. The law is meant to serve people. God designed the Sabbath because people need rest from work. They need margins. They need time to recharge. They need a chance to just step back and take a breath. Look at the sky. Be grateful for your life. Those margins that I mentioned at the start, keeping a reserve of energy if you're a long-distance runner, the 2-second rule if you're driving, trying to build a financial buffer, or what was the other one? Time, yeah, like arriving early. Look, see, I tell you, that's the one that I have trouble with. But you think about those, are they like moral standards? Right and wrong? Are these issues of moral standards that you're going to be judged by? Are these the shoulds? They're not really, are they? They're not the shoulds that you're going to be condemned by if you don't do them. They're simply wise ways of living. You see the difference? The Pharisees thought they should keep the Sabbath for God's sake. Jesus says, God gave you the Sabbath for your sake. The first way of seeing the Sabbath turns it into a rigid rule that you must keep, and you'll be condemned if you don't. The second way is a wise course of action that you can tailor to suit your own circumstances. The Pharisees' way of looking at things took this really ridiculous turn in the very next story. This man with a deformed hand shows up at a local church service, and everyone waits to see if Jesus is going to heal him, because healing is definitely work, and it should be done on one of the 6 working days. But Jesus just can't believe that they've got such a twisted view of how God's instructions work. Do they honestly think that God is honoured by Jesus refusing to heal the man because it's the Sabbath? And he gets very angry with them. He says, is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath or evil? You tell me what's lawful. Is it lawful to save a life or to destroy it? So as we go through the months of our big year, what we're going to discover is that the teachings of Jesus are not about how to be good Christians so that we can meet the high expectations of a demanding Father God in the sky. Jesus' teachings aren't about reaching this high bar of acceptance. If you can be humble enough and faithful enough and get straight A's on your report card, I'll let you into my sky resort when you die. No. The teachings of Jesus reveal the wisest way that we can live as humans, the way that leads to a good life, a beautiful and flourishing life. And not just for you individually, but for whole groups of people. It's the way for a whole society to live in harmony, where everyone is valued, where everyone has enough, where everyone is cared for and everyone is caring for others. The people in my life this week, they had some margins in their life and they were able to care for me. If everyone followed the teachings of Jesus really well, we'd be living in heaven on earth. It'd be like living in that sky resort here and now. And what is that prayer? Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. One wise religious leader went so far as to say, the Sermon on the Mount has no meaning if it is not of vital use in everyday life to everyone. So following the teaching of Jesus isn't a test you have to pass, it's a wise and beneficial way to live. That was me. So you take the teachings of Jesus, consider the wisdom in them, and then adapt them to your own circumstances, like Jesus did in that field with his hungry disciples. Jesus didn't throw the Sabbath out with the bathwater. He kept it and he adapted it to his circumstances. And so this month we're going to look at margins in our lives, and some of you are already doing that, finding ways of building in little bits of Sabbath into our lives, not because it's a rule, but because the Sabbath is good for people. Our society has ignored the Sabbath at its peril. Instead of following this rhythm of good hard work followed by rest and a time to recharge, we've now got this 24/7 world, everything on all the time, and margins have just been squeezed out. You reach for your phone in the middle of the night, watch a TikTok video, order dog food, check the news headlines, message a friend maybe, or order a pizza. The Uber guy will happily bring you a pizza at 2 a.m. He lives to serve you. I warned you I was going boomer. I'm old enough to remember when there were Sunday trading hours. Who else here remembers Sunday trading hours? Yeah, a little less. I remember when shops closed at noon Saturday and reopened on Monday morning. There was a margin, a rhythm to the week. And then large retail companies argued that extended trading hours would provide more employment, especially for uni students who were doing it tough. Do you know, I look for those uni students when I go into Coles and Woolies on a weekend. They're really hard to find amongst all those self-serve counters. Makes me wonder if maybe the best interests of uni students wasn't really their driving motivation. I could be wrong. Australia's new right to disconnect laws, isn't that an acknowledgement that people need Sabbath, that people need margins, they need space to switch off, that our society is not served well by regarding our staff, our employees, merely as a tool to leverage greater financial profits? I'm not suggesting, by the way, that we go back to restricted trading hours. I feel like that ship has long sailed. But we can adapt the Sabbath to our own circumstances. Now, if you're already participating in a big year, either by yourself or with a group of friends or in one of the small groups or the monthly online group, here are some of the challenges that you can decide to choose from this month. You're encouraged to pick one from each category. There's a monk category, a cheerleader category, and a change agent category. So the monk one, here's just one of them. There's 3 different ones. I think you could probably read that. Does anyone need me to read it out? Yeah, anyway, they're there in the Slack channel, and there's also a link to them in the newsletter. So there's the monk one, there's the cheerleader one, and there's a change agent one as well. A lot of people pick that small plant to nurture in my big year group. Do you know, these aren't guaranteed to change the world overnight, but they just might nudge you in the direction of creating some margins, creating some buffers in your life. They might help you find the space to do something other than the go, go, go of your usual existence. You might find yourself this month doing something that nurtures your soul, or that nurtures someone else's soul, or that nurtures the soul of the land that we're living on. So, as I said, the challenges are all there. They're in the Slack channel, they're in the newsletter. You don't get points for doing the challenges. No one is going to check up on you. There is no trophy at the end for the winner, because a big year isn't about striving to achieve the teachings of Jesus, but discovering the wisdom of Jesus' teaching for life.